soon as I opened iCloud, I saw pictures of Adrian and his abuse.
See the look of nothing in his eyes. It's such a stretch from who I know him as. And
on the night of November 25th, 2015, police officers responded to what seemed like a typical domestic disturbance call. But they had no idea they were about to uncover something far more disturbing. Upon arrival, they discovered that one of the household's 6 children was missing, and what they eventually found in the pig pen would change everything. What began as a routine call quickly escalated into a full-scale investigation, with the parents at the center of it all. What happened to the missing child? How were the parents involved? And what exactly did the officers find in that pig pen? When officers arrived at the scene, they learned the 911 call had come from a woman named Heather Jones. She told dispatchers that her husband, Michael, had assaulted her and she feared for her life. According to Heather, the violence erupted after she told him she was leaving. Michael allegedly grabbed her by the throat, choked her, and threatened to shoot her. But that wasn't the most chilling part. Earlier that same day, Heather had gone through his computer, and what she found was terrifying. Searches for a colorless, odorless poison. As officers began to survey the home, 2 things immediately stood out. First were the security cameras, installed in nearly every room, watching everything. But the second was far more alarming. One of the couple's children, a 7-year-old boy, was missing. When they asked about his whereabouts, the mother's response triggered an investigation that would uncover a chilling truth. She told detectives that the boy had died weeks earlier, and that her husband had disposed of the body in the barn where pigs were kept. When officers searched the property, they found confirmation that Heather was telling the truth in the most horrifying way possible. Human remains in the pig pen. Both parents were arrested on the spot, at the center of what would become one of the most disturbing child abuse cases authorities had ever seen. Adrian Jones was born on May 15, 2008, to Michael Jones and Diana Pierce. When he was still a toddler, the family, along with his siblings, moved from Lawrence, Kansas to Topeka. On the surface, the move was for work. Michael had started a bail bonds business. But there was another reason behind the relocation. He was having an affair with Heather, who lived in Topeka and wanted to be closer to her. Not long after the move, Michael left his wife and 3 children. He married Heather and started a new life with her, cutting ties with his past. At the time, Diana was a nursing student, but after Michael's departure, her life began to unravel. Struggling with depression, she turned to partying as a way to cope. Her nights out became frequent, and she often left her younger children in the care of her oldest daughter, who was only 12 years old. Soon, the partying led to a string of short-lived flings. Diana began bringing different men home, and the home environment grew more unstable. Eventually, she and her children lost their home and ended up in a shelter. But they didn't stay there long. Diana entered a new relationship and moved in with her boyfriend, hoping for a fresh start. But life didn't get better. The new partner was abusive, and the children suffered as a result. In August 2011, Diana's mother, Judy Conway, discovered signs of abuse and immediately contacted social services. Concerned for the children's safety, she also attempted to gain custody of her grandchildren, but Michael Jones refused to allow it. Diana had 6 children, 3 with Michael and 3 from a previous relationship. After a brief custody battle, Michael was awarded custody of his biological children, Adrian, Madison, and Bella. The other 3 were placed in the care of Judy Conway, as Diana was deemed unfit to care for them. Adrian and his siblings moved in with their father, his new wife Heather, and Heather's own children from a prior relationship. After living through abuse and instability in their mother's home, the move was supposed to offer safety and stability. Their father, in theory, would protect them. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. What was meant to be a new beginning quickly became a nightmare. Not long after arriving in their new home, Adrian was diagnosed with PTSD and severe emotional detachment. From that moment on, his path was set, and the system that was supposed to protect him would fail him again and again. Michael and Heather began claiming that Adrian was acting out in disturbing ways. They said he was hurting the other children who were all girls and stealing food at night. If those allegations were true, the responsible course of action would have been to seek professional help for the boy. Instead, they came up with a cruel solution. They began restraining him regularly. Just 3 months after Michael's children moved in, Child Protective Services received a call expressing concern for their safety. The report wasn't about Adrian. It was about one of his siblings who had rapidly lost a noticeable amount of weight. The caller also raised other serious red flags. Michael allegedly kept firearms scattered throughout the house, within reach of the children, and Heather was said to be a frequent drug user. Altogether, the home was a volatile and dangerous environment, a disaster waiting to unfold. Just a month later, another call was made, this time reporting a child in the Jones household with internal bleeding and a severe injury to the forehead. Michael and Heather claimed the child had fallen down the stairs, but the doctor who examined the injuries disagreed. The wounds didn't line up with their explanation. This time, Child Protective Services took action and opened an official investigation. When a caseworker arrived at the home, Michael admitted that this wasn't the first so-called staircase accident. He said Adrian had also fallen down the stairs a month earlier, resulting in a head injury. When the caseworker interviewed Heather, she didn't hold back. She claimed Michael often spanked his children so hard that he left marks on their skin. And it wasn't just the kids. She admitted he was violent toward her as well. After questioning the adults, the caseworker turned to the children, and what they revealed painted a disturbing picture. While all of them endured physical abuse, Adrian suffered the brunt of it. The children described how Michael and Heather would lead him to a secluded corner of the house, out of sight, and beat him relentlessly, aiming for his stomach, legs, and hands. The caseworker also discovered that the children weren't attending school in any formal sense. Michael claimed they were being homeschooled through something he called the Jones Academy. But in reality, it was nothing more than a front, a way to keep the children isolated, hidden from teachers or adults who might notice the signs of abuse. By the end of the investigation, Child Protective Services had gathered enough evidence to confirm that the children were being mistreated. But instead of removing them from the home or taking legal action, they chose a dangerously passive route. Michael was simply asked to sign a document, nothing more than a promise on paper, that he would protect the children from further harm. Michael was also ordered to keep Heather away from both the children and the home. As a result, social workers removed Heather's children from the household and placed them with a relative. But Michael's children, Adrian, Madison, and Bella, remained in his custody. For a brief period, things appeared to settle down in the Jones household. But the calm was an illusion. Michael quickly violated the order, allowing Heather back into the home. And with her return, the cycle of abuse resumed. By December 2012, Child Protective Services began receiving multiple reports concerning Adrian and his siblings. Each time a caseworker visited, Michael had a new explanation for Adrian's behavior. He claimed the boy was stealing food, hoarding scraps, picking at his wounds, and even setting small fires around the house. But these weren't signs of a child acting out. They were classic trauma responses, symptoms often seen in children who have endured severe abuse.
Watch Adrian's reaction to the left of your screen as a man identified as Willie Flowers walks into the shot.
Adrian was later diagnosed with disruptive behavior disorder and a parent-child relational problem. Still, Michael and Heather did nothing to support or treat him. There were no therapists, no interventions, only more neglect. In early 2013, Michael moved the family again, this time to Plattsburgh, Missouri. But the new location didn't bring safety. Shortly after their arrival, Missouri's Child Protective Services began receiving disturbing reports about what was happening behind closed doors in the Jones home. In March 2013, a disturbing report was made to authorities. Michael and Heather were allegedly forcing Adrian to stand in a corner for hours at a time. It was also revealed that they had installed locks on the outside of his bedroom door, using them to confine him for long stretches, effectively turning his room into a prison cell. When a social worker visited the home, they spoke with Adrian, but made a critical error. The interview was conducted in front of Michael and Heather. Before the boy could fully explain how he was being locked away, Heather cut in, claiming the locks were simply a disciplinary measure because Adrian was violent toward his siblings. The caseworker noted that the house was filthy and unkempt, but despite the red flags, no action was taken. The case was quietly closed. 4 months later, in July 2013, another call forced social services to reopen the investigation. This time, the report alleged that Heather regularly beat the children and either locked them in their rooms or left them outside for hours at a time. When a caseworker arrived, Adrian opened up. He said his father and stepmother constantly screamed at him and kicked him in the head so hard that a bone came out. He described Michael punching him in the stomach while Heather dragged him by the ear. But once again, the adults deflected blame. They insisted Adrian was mentally unstable, too difficult to manage, and prone to making things up. This time, the social worker finally grasped the gravity of the situation. But instead of removing the children from their abusive environment, Child Services made a fatal mistake. They opted to provide intensive in-home services, a decision that would soon prove tragically inadequate. Just weeks later, Michael and Heather informed the caseworker that they were moving back to Kansas and would no longer require in-home support. Believing them, Missouri authorities closed the case, but not before sending a report to Kansas, warning that Adrian was in serious danger. When Kansas authorities attempted to pick up the investigation, they uncovered a stunning truth. The Jones family had never left Missouri. Michael and Heather had lied about relocating, manipulating the system just long enough to make the case disappear. And so, for months, Adrian continued to endure unimaginable abuse, trapped in a home that should have been under constant scrutiny, but instead was left unchecked. It wasn't until late 2015, when the family truly moved back to Kansas and settled into a rented house, that the facade began to unravel. Despite multiple reports warning of Adrian's deteriorating condition, he was continually overlooked, a forgotten child slipping through every crack in the system. The truth about what happened to Adrian remained buried until November 2015, when authorities uncovered his remains, and with them, the full extent of the nightmare he had endured. What they found revealed that Adrian's final days had been nothing short of torture. Michael and Heather had stripped him naked and locked him in a shower stall where he was left alone to waste away. Weakened by starvation and abuse, Adrian eventually lost the strength to stand. They strapped him to a chair, helpless and deteriorating, as the life drained from his small body. Days later, he was dead. But even in death, Michael and Heather's cruelty didn't stop. For 2 weeks, they left his body where it fell, in the same shower where he had suffered, showing no remorse, no humanity. To them, Adrian wasn't a child anymore. He was an inconvenience. And then came their final act of horror. Michael brought home a group of pigs. The animals were starved for days, driven to desperation. And when the time came, the couple carried out something almost beyond comprehension. They fed Adrian's remains to the pigs. As unthinkable as this was, it wasn't even the worst of what Adrian endured while he was alive. The pain, the isolation, the fear. It had gone on for years, and no one had stopped it. As the investigation deepened, authorities began to uncover the full, harrowing scope of Adrian's suffering, and it was far worse than anyone had imagined.
The angle pictures of his body and how bad he was in the last few weeks.
Michael and Heather had wired their home with surveillance cameras, not for protection, but to obsessively monitor Adrian's every move. The same system they used to control and punish him would eventually become the very thing that sealed their fate. Shortly after their arrest, Heather made an unexpected move. she reached out to their landlord, Jen Hovers, and asked for a favor: help retrieving photos of her children from her Apple iCloud account. Hoping to preserve family memories, Jen agreed. But what she found was something else entirely. Inside the iCloud account was a digital chamber of horrors: photos, videos, documentation of systematic torture. Adrian's final months had been recorded in heartbreaking detail. Stunned and horrified, Jen immediately turned everything over to police. In her hands was the undeniable proof investigators needed: the evidence that Michael and Heather had tortured a child to death. The images told a devastating story. Adrian, once a bright, energetic boy, visibly wasting away. Each frame showed his transformation, growing thinner, weaker, more hollow-eyed. Investigators believed he had been starved to the point of severe malnutrition, so debilitated that he could no longer fight back. Not that resisting would have saved him. Some images showed Adrian strapped to an inversion table, blindfolded like a prisoner. In others, he was bound at the wrists and ankles, left outside in the elements. One surveillance clip showed him glancing around nervously, haunted, watchful, aware that he was always being watched. In one especially haunting video, Adrian could be seen using only his mouth to pick up a bowl and eat whatever was inside, his hands too restrained or weak to help him. Minutes later, Heather appeared on camera. Off-screen, she could be heard telling the other children that Adrian was eating applesauce filled with bugs and dirt. And yet, Adrian kept eating. He was so desperately hungry it didn't matter. To him, food was food. Investigators also uncovered another cruel punishment. Michael and Heather had forced Adrian to stand neck-deep in a filthy, freezing swimming pool. Sometimes overnight. They didn't care that the water was contaminated, that the cold could kill him. His pain was the point. The abuse wasn't just systematic, it was sadistic. The couple didn't just hurt Adrian, they seemed to enjoy it. They even boasted about it on Facebook. Posts bragged about using a taser on the boy. Photos showed his tiny body marked with bruises, burns, and welts, unmistakable evidence of what he had endured. As if that weren't enough, Heather also kept a written log of the abuse, meticulously documenting incidents that stretched as far back as 2012. It wasn't just that they tortured him, it was that they wanted to remember it. Heather and Michael Jones both pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and were sentenced to life in prison. Under current law, they will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. A fact that continues to haunt those who remember what they did to Adrian. In the wake of the case, the state of Kansas came under intense scrutiny. Adrian's family, his mother, Diana Pierce, his maternal grandmother, Judy Conway, and his adult sister, filed a lawsuit against the state's child welfare agency in 2017. They argued that the agency had failed its most basic duty, to protect a vulnerable child from known, ongoing abuse. They claimed Adrian should have been removed from his father and stepmother's care long before they were given the chance to kill him. The case was scheduled to go to trial in April 2025, but in March 2024, Kansas officials agreed to a $1 million settlement with the family, an attempt to acknowledge the system's failure without allowing it to be fully aired in court. Meanwhile, in 2021, Kansas passed Adrian's Law, a direct response to his tragic death. The legislation mandates that officers and caseworkers must personally observe children who are alleged victims of abuse or neglect, closing one of the many loopholes that allowed Adrian to slip through the cracks. Lawmakers hoped the law would serve as a safeguard, a way to prevent another child from suffering as he did. But for Adrian's family, no amount of money or legislation can undo what happened. The trauma lingers, and the question remains: is Adrian's Law enough to truly protect vulnerable children in the future? We want to hear your thoughts. Can this law make a difference, or is more still needed to fix a system that failed so completely? Let us know in the comments. If you're interested in more cases like this one, don't forget to subscribe, and be sure to check out the next video below.